I'm Hilah. Welcome to Hilah Cooking. Today I'm going to show you how to make a homemade pie crust, and it's not very hard at all, and it uses 100% real butter, and it's light and flaky and delicious and perfect for all of your holiday needs. All you need is 4 ingredients: flour, baking powder, ice water, and butter. Okay, I've got a cup of flour and I put it in a bowl and then I put it in the freezer. I want to get it really, really cold, and also make sure that my butter is really cold. I'm going to add a teaspoon of baking powder, and this is going to help keep it light, and I'm going to dice this butter up. The reason that you want to get the flour cold is so that the butter doesn't melt too fast. The key to making a light and fluffy pie crust is when you're cutting the butter into the flour. That's what I'll show you how to do in just a second. When you're cutting that in, what you're doing basically is getting each little piece of butter coated in flour, and then it's kind of like making a miniature, like a croissant, like on a microscopic level. So then you've got all this little layers of like butter and flour, butter and flour, butter and flour, and then as it cooks, those little tiny butter fragments melt and leave a little air pocket in the flour, and that's what makes it light and fluffy. Food science. Okay, so now that I've got my little butter cubes in here, the first thing to do is kind of use a fork to break up the cubes of butter and toss them around in the flour and try to get each of these little cubes coated in flour, and then we'll start to break it up a little bit more finely. Now, if you don't have a pastry cutter, which is kind of a little weird instrument that's hard to describe, I don't have one. You can use a fork or you can use a couple of knives, but really I think that the easiest thing to do is just to get your little hands in there. So wash your little paws, and then we're just going to start breaking each of these little butter cubes into smaller and smaller pieces. And then as you break them into smaller pieces, drop them back in the flour so it gets kind of coated up. Now, if you feel like when you're breaking your butter up, if you feel like your butter's starting to get real soft, like maybe your house is really warm, or maybe your body temperature is just hot, just kidding. Please go ahead and just put your whole bowl with the butter and everything in it. Just go ahead and put it back in the freezer or the refrigerator for 5 or 10 minutes to let that butter harden up, because that's what you don't want. Is you don't want melty butter, because that's not going to give you the flakiness. You want the butter to melt once it's shaped into a pie crust. All right, so I'm gonna get a little bit more rough with this. People are real worried too about like overworking pie crust, and that is a concern, but not really until you add the water. So there's this protein in flour that's called gluten, and that's what makes bread chewy. And it forms when you add liquid to it. Until the liquid's added, you don't really risk forming the gluten strands. It's what you want to avoid when you're making pie crust, because you don't want chewy pie crust. So you can just, as long as you keep it cold, go ahead and work the heck out of it until you add the water, and then you got to be a little careful. Okay, so this looks pretty good. I've got some bigger chunks and some smaller chunks. Probably the biggest chunk of butter I have here is about the size of a pea. That's as big as you want to get. The rest of it is a little bit more, hey, butter overboard. The rest of it is a little smaller than that. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, so now I'm ready to add my ice water. And what the recipe means when it says ice water is literally put some ice in your water, again, because you want to try to keep it really cold. So about a 1/4 cup, but I'm just gonna put in a couple tablespoons to start with. And you can see it's starting to stick together in a little ball. Add a little bit more. Okay, we're almost there. I don't want to add too much water, because then I have to add more flour, and then it's kind of a mess. So just a little at a time. Okay, now see how it's all kind of balling up here? That's good. That's Very good. Now I'm gonna form it into a ball and wrap it in saran wrap and stick it in the fridge for a little bit. Okay, now we're ready to wrap it up in a little piece of saran wrap. I don't know what the Pioneer ladies did before they had saran wrap, but it really works good for this. All right. And this is, if you pat it out into a disc, that's going to help you when you roll it later. Okay. All right, now I've got it wrapped up tight. I'm just going to put it in the fridge for 20-30 minutes, and then we'll come back and roll it. All right, my friends, we're ready to roll. All right, so I've got some flour here, and I'm just gonna sprinkle it liberally. I'm using a 9-inch pie pan, so that means I want to roll out my dough to be about 12 inches across. So let's get a big flour circle happening here that's about 12 inches. Okay. I'm gonna have a little extra flour over on the side. So sprinkle that, get my rolling pin, kind of powder my pin also. And then we'll start to roll. Okay. Now at the early stages you want to make sure you're kind of picking it up and redistributing the flour just to make sure it's not sticking. And you start in the middle, kind of push your way out. And you can turn it to make it a little easier. And just try to keep it as even as possible so you end up with a pretty round shape. Okay, this is almost big enough, and you can see here all these little butter spots, and that is great. And every little butter spot now, they look like kind of big areas of butter, but we're covering them with more flour as we roll it, so it's going to be light and flaky. Okay, and that is about the right size. So now we're going to transfer it. The way to do that is kind of roll this real lightly onto your pen. Pick that up, pull this over here, and then bloop. All right, now I don't want to like stretch it in there, just want to kind of ease it in there like that. You can see it's kind of dropping down into the, there we go. Be gentle with your pie crust. It's a baby. All right, now I like to not bother with trimming all this stuff and just kind of roll it up onto itself. But if you wanted to get a small knife, you could trim off all this excess. But I like to leave a little thicker edge around the pie crust anyway. There we go. And then if you want to make it a little fancier, you can kind of pinch it like that and make a fluted edge. All right, fluted edge has been flouted. Okay, so I personally am going to fill this with pie filling and then bake it like this. If you were making like a cream pie or something, you would want to bake this at 425 for 10 or 15 minutes. Prick the bottom of it with a fork so it doesn't get all puffy. That's if you wanted to do like a pre-baked pie shell. I rarely do that, so I'm probably just gonna put like some pecan pie filling in here and then do that. So, all right, that's how you make a homemade pie crust. Look at that, just like Grandma used to make. All right, happy holidays. See ya. I'm not gonna taste this.